Well, here we are for another episode together. This one, I think we're going to talk about a lot of things. Ultimately, I think getting paid faster and more is always the most important thing for our contractors. That's what it seems that everybody wants to talk about. And so I think we'll talk about that. I think we talk about a couple of our client success stories, our success stories, kind of how we have developed over the last 8 years to become who we are today. Mm-hmm. And so I think we could start there. We could talk about some of our clients, or we could talk about some of the successes that we've had as a company.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe some specific issues facing contractors, different, specific line items on their invoices, different things like that create challenges. Yeah, pumped.
Yeah, I think if we wanted to start, I would talk about, there's a couple companies that come to mind. One of the things that I think we've done really well, especially early on, is we've partnered with the right companies, the right contractors that have really seen our value and then used our value to grow their businesses. Right. I can think of 3 contractors off the top of my mind. One started, they were doing about 12 jobs a week, in size. They grew over the last 6 years because they probably started with us in year 2. They had grown over the last 6 years to doing 70 to 75 jobs a week, right? Exponential growth because we were able to eliminate, and frankly, full credit to those guys. But they used the additional funds, the additional 100%. Resources, the additional speed to collect and reinvested into their company. That's one example. And I can think of 2 others in near identical ways. Use the additional cash flow, use the speed to cash flow, invested in their own business growth, buying vehicles, advertising, marketing, and said, well, because I have this and I have the time.
The extra time
where I'm not dealing with trying to negotiate every invoice. I've now outsourced that. Now my brain is solely focused on my own core business.
And that's the idea, right? Is to be able to alleviate such a huge portion of their business, which is their AR and tracking down payment, alleviate that from them. We've talked about this in other episodes where, contractors like to contract. Like that's what they do. That's where they like to focus. And if we can help alleviate the AR headache and systems for them so that they can focus on actually that part of their business and continuing to grow that part of their business, those are the best. When we come across contractors like that and partner with them, it's exciting to see their growth and be able to help them reach their goals of growth. That's been super exciting to see. So, and there are quite a few of those examples that come to mind thinking back over the last 8 years on what we've been able to do and the relationships that we've created with those contractors along the way. I can think of a handful that have really become, friends where I'll probably have for life outside of whether OCS continues to do their billing or not. So it's kind of been neat to see that and that growth with them. As far as some of the other things that you'd kind of introed with, I'd love to kind of jump into some of the headaches that contractors have on the daily outside of just collecting, right? Maybe they're getting pushback from carriers. As an attorney looking at this industry, I've been able to participate in and advise through different events on the importance of doing certain things in the industry, and as a contractor, what certain things that can be done, should be done in order to protect yourself. One of the things that comes to my mind is asbestos and asbestos testing. A lot of pushback coming from that. It's when you dive into the federal regulations, oftentimes even, and you look into the requirements behind that, it's not just about, any home that's built after a certain year, you have to, you shouldn't test, or anything built before that, you should test. That's really not what it comes down to, right? It comes down to even liability and protecting yourself as a contractor. We know that ACM, asbestos containing material, is constantly coming into the industry. You can go to Home Depot right now and buy it because it's these things that are made overseas are not always regulated. So there is ACM in everything today still. We've seen, newer construction come back and test positive for asbestos containing material. We know you have to test commercial buildings. We know you have to test any buildings that have 4 or more units. Those are buildings that are all built from the same materials as these homes that are being built today. So logic would tell you should be testing the new homes. If you fail as a contractor to do these things, that opens you up to liability. So different things like this we're able to help with contractors, but oftentimes contractors are hesitant or they're scared to do that, or maybe they don't understand why they should. A lot of them say, well, if we bill it, adjuster's going to be mad at us. Maybe they won't pay it. There's different line items like that the contractors will always get pushback from with the carriers, whether it's the asbestos tests, it's the thermal imaging, whether it's overhead and profit. There's all kinds of line items, air scrubbers on category 2 or even category 1 losses, and again, I look at it maybe from a slightly different perspective, coming from the legal side of it and wanting to protect, these contractors from exposure to unnecessary liabilities by not taking these steps. And then when I see adjusters kick back against that and be like, we're not paying it, you shouldn't do those things, it gets a little frustrating from the legal liability standpoint. But what have you seen or anything that you want to touch on with specific line items that you're going, man, if contractors would only stand up for themselves and do this or that?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because we've evolved just as a company on how we approach things, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some things that we've seen over the last 8 years, right, that have just changed. And not to name names because I'm not going to do that, but one company that would pay service call every time. By the way, most companies pay service call, but about 4 or 5 years ago, one company decided we are not paying service call anymore. And there's no real legal backing. There's no real legal justification. There's no real justification at all for not. It's just one company decided we are not, right? And so it's those type of things that we've seen just over the last 8 years where it's man, that doesn't make a ton of sense. This 3-trade thing we've talked about probably multiple times regarding overhead and profit. And there's 3 trades. There's a 3-trade rule that came into effect. It felt like years ago, and then it's still being talked about today, but even less than it used to be talked about. that argument has just become less. It's just we've seen again over the 8 years, just the different flows that insurance companies or carriers have changed. Yeah. Right. They've changed different things. And so we've been dynamic in tracking that, right? We've been dynamic in making sure we know what has happened, what is happening, who is paying for what. And I think that's given us the ability to really have a strong position against some of those line items, right? And to your point, I think some contractors are I'm just not going to add it because I don't want to deal with the headache. Right. I don't want to deal with Jim at XYZ insurance company saying I'm not paying for that. And so therefore I'm just going to remove it because what are my other options, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just going to remove it. Or
not do it altogether.
Yeah. Or bill the homeowner and then the homeowner's upset with me, right?
Right.
And so So anyway, I think that's been one of those things in terms of cash flow management, in terms of how to get paid more faster, right? It's you've got to bill for the things you do. That's our position. If you do it, you should bill for it because it's most likely reasonable to be done. And if it's not, then the carrier has no obligation to pay it if it wasn't reasonable, but bill for the things that are done. If you don't know what those things are, there's 1,000 reference guides, the IICRC is where I'd start to say, what am I allowed to do and get paid for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a fear in the industry of billing for certain things, right? There's, The fraud word that gets thrown around a lot. It's fraud if you do that. Why? Why is it fraud if I take an asbestos test? OSHA tells me that I have to protect my employees on every demolition job that I do. And so I have to, under OSHA, take an asbestos test. Why is that fraud when the law requires it? Why is it fraud when I put an air scrubber on a Category 2 loss to protect the homeowner? Why? There is fear attached to billing for certain things when really they're things that are justified, and not just justified, but you really should be doing, but based on how insurance companies and adjusters have specifically positioned certain line items, it's created almost like this, well, that's just not how the industry operates. Well, just because something doesn't operate in a certain way doesn't make that the right way to do it. It's the way that people have done it because they backed down from actually doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think it could be fear, and it could just be sheer laziness. It could be like, I don't want to deal with that, right? Or it could be, I don't want to tie up my cash flow that I need tomorrow because I have 3 line items on there that an adjuster doesn't want to pay for.
That's a good point.
And so therefore they're like, it's going to delay my process. I'll either not bill for it, or I'll be super fast to concede it to get cash in the door, which is a tough leverage position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And it's easy to understand, a contractor's hesitance to do that. But some other specific examples of maybe where OCS has been able to step in and help solve a problem for contractors. We've talked a lot about the assignment of benefits in the past, but I'm not sure we've ever gone super deep into what OCS has done in order to protect that assignment of benefits, and not just protect it, but really implement it and create and use it as a tool in this industry, almost make it more standardized in the restoration space. So maybe we can dive in a little bit on the assignment and number one, briefly, again, just reiterating why it's important, and maybe some things that OCS has done to help pave the way for contractors to benefit from that AOB.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, obviously, the AOB is powerful because it is a powerful direct pay authorization. It does way more than that, but it is that at the very least. And one of the things that has helped us in terms of OCS just being faster to collect is we try to get the majority of these checks sent to the contractor directly or sent to us out of the property owner's hands, so that there's not one additional person to go chase down for this money, right? In the rare cases, which I do believe they are rare cases, that the property owner decides they want to keep that money, we've gone back to the carriers and we've said, hey, there's an assignment of benefits here. It's your job now to go track down that money from the property owner. But because you were supposed to pay us, we've had a lot of success doing that. And so I think that's one of those powerful tools to just improve cash flow speed, to say, hey, this is where the money should have gone, and let's go make it go there. Obviously, we've been in legal fights regarding the AOB. I can't even remember the year. It was years ago now. In the state of Arizona, we went to the Court of Appeals and won that case, and that was a big win for us because it did prove what we always knew to be true, which was the assignment of benefits on a post-loss assignment of benefits should and can and is warranted, and it's powerful, and it does not change what the obligation of the insurer is. They are required to still pay.
Yep.
And they just are paying a different party. And so that was a big win for us, I remember, here in Arizona. And then I know we've had those wins throughout.
Similar
wins across multiple.
Yeah. Jump in by way of quick disclaimer on that. Not all states have laws that support post-loss assignment of benefits. So become familiar with your state's laws and know whether or not you can use them. If not, if you're in a state that does not allow the assignment, get involved with that state. See if there's an association you can join to try to push the legislature to open up these laws. You think about it in the medical billing space. Imagine what would happen to the American economy if all of a sudden health insurance companies no longer had to send payments directly to the medical care provider. and they sent it to the patients. I, for one, have never received a health insurance check from my health insurance companies, and that happens for a reason. It's because there's a service that's performed by a doctor, and that doctor needs to be paid. And insurance, the law is set up to protect that doctor's payments under the assignment of benefits. And that's kind of where the concept of the AOB in this industry for us kind of came from, was the medical side, right? And so the fact that some states carve out this post-loss assignment provision in their legislation against restoration contractors specifically, while still allowing it in the medical space, makes zero sense to me. It really doesn't. I mean, homes are a consumer's biggest asset most of the time in this country. And without that assignment of benefits, which is the contractor's best guarantee to get payment for the work that they do on a covered claim, their real other recourse is to go and file a lien on the home, which is now you're putting that consumer in a way worse position, because oftentimes these consumers don't know what to do with the insurance check. They don't know where it goes, what it's for. And so they'll spend it to, just yesterday we had one come through where I found there was a case I was working on where the homeowner got the check and they didn't know, they thought it was theirs, right? They thought that the contract had already been paid by the insurance company because of the contract. And so when they got the check, they were 100% convinced that was their money. That was their compensation for the loss that they went through, and it was to help them put their life back together. And we kind of had to educate the homeowner and be like, hey, look, that's actually not your check. That was actually supposed to go to this contractor. Here's the paperwork from the insurance company that says that. But that happens every day, because most homeowners don't have a water loss like regularly. Most of the times it's their first one and probably the only one they'll ever have, and so they don't know the rules. But it's interesting to see that. So that was my quick disclaimer and rant on the importance of assignments of benefits. But yeah, and there's different ways that OCS can step in and has stepped in to help the contractors, especially when the homeowners do get the checks like that. You touched on that. So are there any other, you talked briefly about the service call, but there's always going to be line items like that, whether it's the service call, it's, dry times, one of the new themes that I'm hearing in the industry right now is, even with the preferred vendors, that they're only allowed to dry a structure down to like 60%. And that the carrier will not pay for anything beyond that. Once they reach that benchmark of 60%, the carrier's like, done.
Yeah, I mean, that argument is just going to hold no water. Just because the S500 talks about the dry standard and what's required in the dry standard.
It's so wild that the kind of stuff that's happening. You're right, but that's the stuff that will always happen, right?
Yeah,
is these types of things. But any other line items, Jeremy, come to your mind on?
No, I mean, I think that this will be a thing that we'll deal with forever.
Today it's this, tomorrow it's that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's easy to harp on a couple, but you're right. Today those are the ones, and tomorrow be something else. And the good thing is, like we've talked about so many times, is OCS, based on the sheer volume of claims that we process, we're able to recognize those trends a lot faster, how to counteract those trends and how to deal with them. We had previously talked about some of the benefits that OCS can provide to a contractor, when they sign up with us to do their billing, which is talking about their back office staff that's over the AR. We'd previously talked about the expertise, or at least the training, that OCS's employees bring to that accounts receivable process, where oftentimes contractors are just finding anybody to come and chase money without the ability to actually justify or understand why certain charges are on the invoice to help the insurance company understand why that was done. Outside of that, Jeremy, what type of benefits does a contractor gain on the AR staffing side of things?
Yeah, I think staffing, again, in the state of the industry, we see this regularly, True. Right? Employees, staffing, attrition, turnover. Mm-hmm. Like, this is one thing that everybody deals with. And obviously, for contractors, it's the majority probably on the field side, right?
Yeah.
And technicians and staffing and hiring. For us, obviously, we deal with the same thing. But what we've been able to do is just be really good and efficient at training and developing, right? Because again, it's our core business, right? And so I can imagine when the back office staff is having constant turnover and attrition, they're dealing with that. And then they have to onboard somebody new. They have to train them in that very nuanced part of their business. And then 6 months later or a year later, that person's gone and they got to do it again. Right. And they got to do it again and they got to do it again. And frankly, then one of the things too is like when contractors have big months, small months, big weeks, small weeks, one additional person is not always just like the answer, right? They can't just hire. So one person's overwhelmed. And then what happens then is they're overwhelmed, they're unhappy, they leave, right? And so this is one of those things that I think, frankly, going into this business, starting OCS, I didn't think was such a value add to contractors, but we have the ability to fluctuate in big numbers, right? Because we have a lot of contractors and a lot of claims. And so therefore we have the ability to say, hey, one contractor doubles next month, we can absorb that quickly, right? Because we have the capacity to do that. If that contractor doubled and had their own internal back office, it's just a heavy lift. They could pull it off for sure, but maybe not at the cost of one or two of their employees because they're overworked, right? And so staffing, I think it continues to be a thing. Training and developing a new employee in terms of the back office is hard to do because, again, it's a nuanced part of their business.
And giving that training the time necessary to actually get the benefit out of the training you're seeking. It's not just a couple-hour training and you're done. It's a constant hand-holding process to help educate, train, and get that employee to the position to be able to do their job.
And you feel like you're on a hamster wheel because that employee
that's right.
is not going to be there forever, oftentimes, because it's a hard job. Negotiating with adjusters is a hard job. It's not always super fun. You're just tracking money, you're negotiating invoices, and then you're tracking that maybe to a homeowner that could or couldn't be happy, and it's just like, it's never a fun job. And so I think that you look at turnover in general, but like contact centers have high turnover. That's call centers, right? Adjusters are high turnover positions, right? That makes billing back office staff for contractors a high turnover position as well, because it's probably a hybrid between those two things, right? And so, and it's a challenge that we have here at OCS is the turnover. Right?
But that's our challenge.
But that's our challenge.
Get to take that challenge on.
We've been efficient at making sure that we've been spearheading the onboarding process, the training process to make sure that we are, again, absorbing that challenge easier than a contractor would be.
Because we're not worried about training technicians to go out in the field and do the job that's
right. We're training our job type is of this. Archetype.
So we train employees to do this. That's what our focus is. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a strong benefit to OCS, like you said, that we didn't quite anticipate from the beginning that contractors have. So with that, man, I don't think we have much else to talk about on that subject today. I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, if you want to contact us, please do. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your feedback, specific pain points, maybe even to see what you guys are dealing with, and love to chat through some of that stuff with you guys. But oneclaimsolution.com, check us out, contact us. Love to hear from you guys.